The views and opinions expressed by callers, guests, and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the Black Talk Radio Network and Black Talk Media Project. Black Talk Radio is new black media for the new millennium.
Rise up, 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 rise up. Showtime. Just lift your eyes up, let your wise rise up. See the signs of the times. If it's time, rise up, rise up. When death and hell dwell among all God's people, when those we chose and trusted have become completely corrupted and inherently evil, when the feast that feeds you starves our father's children, when snuff, porn, and pedo forms begin to get top billing, rise up. When famine claims millions, when justice gives blind eyes to billions, when the Lord's anger is no longer feared, if his protection is gone and your enemies are near, if you've seen the seas spill over and the mountains shake, break, and fall, if the moon ever turns blood red and you can't see the sun at all, rise up. No matter if the
Peace and welcome to New Abolitionist Radio on the Black Talk Radio Network, a program that seeks to educate, inform, and agitate on the issue of 21st century legalized slavery. Hosted by social activist and spoken word poet Max Parthas, with Black Talk Media Project founder Scotty Reed, and with guest host Otis Griffin and Yusef Hassan. On this program, we discuss recent news on legalized 21st century slavery and human trafficking as it is allowed through the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, along with projects and people who help combat it. Today is the September 20th, 2017 broadcast of New Abolitionist Radio, and we've just returned from the Carolinas Human Rights Organizing Conference, aka Chronic 2017. On this day, in 1958, Martin Luther King Jr. was stabbed in the chest by a black woman while he was autographing books in a Harlem department store. The woman was placed under mental observation. It led to a speech called, "If I Had Just Sneezed." Also on this date in 1830, the first Negro Convention of Free Men agreed to start their boycott on slave-produced goods. In 2017, we're still stuck on stupid with our boycotts. Let's get your Super Bowl tickets early. Tonight, we're opening up the phone lines and inviting organizers and participants of Chronic 2017 to join the conversation. Call in and share your experiences with us. Our abolitionist in profile is Levi Coffin, who was an important figure in the Underground Railroad network that helped thousands of fugitive slaves escape to freedom in the years before the American Civil War. In the segment, For Freedom's Sake, A History of Rebellion, we remember the Secret Six, or the Secret Committee of Six, who were a group of men that secretly funded the 1859 raid on Harper's Ferry by abolitionist John Brown. Our writer of the 21st Century Underground Railroad is Baltimore's Lamar Johnson, who was released after serving 14 years for a murder when the Innocence Project teamed with prosecutor Marilyn Mosby's office to win his release. Got a question or a comment? You can call us toll-free, USA, at 866-510-9025. You can chat with us and others by logging in at uberconference.com/Black Talk Radio Network. Once again, I'm Max Parthas, and my first time back after about 3 weeks there. What's happening, Scotty?
Hey, what's good, Max? I'm good, man. Just doing the best I can under these conditions. And so I don't have anything to complain about. And I am looking to hear people who experienced Chronic 2017 to hear what their experience was like. That was my first time attending a human rights conference where you had workshops like that, and there were a lot of workshops, and only got to attend a few, besides the one that I helped present. But I'm looking forward to the videos when they get published, so I can check out all, because there was a lot of great stuff, man, in that program. And one of the things, and this relates to 21st century slavery and human trafficking, but that first day, I was able to catch some of a workshop on cannabis health and healing and science. I know that's not how it was titled. I just don't remember right now. But I went in there, and the doctor kept saying that within 2 years, the United States is going to legalize cannabis. And I'm like, okay, 2 years, Donald Trump still got 3. All right. And so therefore, since Jeff Sessions did not resign, so we know Jeff Sessions is all about waging war on weed, and which is really a war on people. And you know, and he just kept saying that. I was like, but wait a minute, do you really think Trump? So he said that it was going to be some moves made at the UN level, and that the United States basically will have no choice. And I also found out from that workshop, from the materials, that I did not know this. Cannabis is recognized by the United Nations as it's a protected plant because of its medicinal benefits. There is a protected plant, but there is no protection for the people who use it.
Yes, sir. Do we also have Otis on the air with us today?
I see him.
Yes, Max. I'm sorry, I'm here.
What's happening, Otis, man? I just want to say thank you, brother. You've been doing a great job while I was on hiatus.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate the opportunity. I mean, I'm a big fan of this broadcast. So I'm going to hang back tonight if I hear from some people that were there on the ground with that chronic.
Word, man. Word, indeed. Yeah, it's wonderful to have some new voices come through and express their feelings and sentiments. And I heard some gems come out of those two, man. Like when Yusuf Hassan was talking about how PETA used the 13th Amendment in order to address the enslavement, quote unquote, of whales. I thought that was a huge deal. Like you could really take that now and work with it for humans in the same way that they
wait a minute though, Max. There's some confusion here. I don't the 13th Amendment has nothing to do with animals. It has to do with human beings. And
yes,
what were they trying to say? Were they trying to say that the whales are enslaved and the United States abolished slavery? Because if that's how they're trying to use it, where they're incorrect, and if they actually understood what they were reading, they would know that slavery was never abolished. That's all I'm saying.
You know, PETA is a global organization, and on several fronts, they've attempted to define certain animals or mammals or sea creatures as persons and as legalized persons, like dolphins, for instance.
And the other thing is they kind of set the precedent for cruel and unusual punishment on any living organism or animal, mammals. So, I mean, you got to take a gift horse when it comes.
But I don't see that as no gift horse. Y'all have yet to tell me the gift. And excuse me if I don't recall, but y'all brothers know that I do hours and hours and hours and listen to hours and hours of different conversations and stories. So explain to me exactly how PETA is using the 13th Amendment to free animals, because 13th Amendment doesn't free anyone. It actually enslaves people.
If Yusuf was here, he could probably pull up the article, but I don't have access to it. But from my perspective, here's where I'm at on it. If they've already had a court case where they fought this like this, using that particular amendment, whether it was about whales or people, some of the legwork for what we have to do is already done. You could see the pros and cons arguments coming back and forth. So it would save a lot of legwork towards us doing something for people.
I need context.
I tried to be poignant about it by saying the clause of it being the 13th, talking about cruel and unusual punishment. That might be the section they use. It may not
the 13th Amendment says nothing.
Of humans. Just the fact that it was cruel and unusual punishment.
But the 13th Amendment doesn't address cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, it doesn't have those words in it. I know what amendment they're talking about. It's just
that's the 8th Amendment.
Yes, that's because people have tried to use that to address solitary confinement. So maybe that's what Yousef was talking about, the 8th Amendment.
I think so. The 8th.
Yeah, because the 13th Amendment has nothing to do. But slavery and involuntary servitude is pretty inhumane, if you ask me. And
without a doubt.
And it legalizes it.
Yes.
Just for our listeners, if you want to follow the links of what we're talking about, it's all available in our planning stage or our planning page. And the link to our planning page is on New Abolitionist Radio on Facebook. You can check it out there, or you could go directly to the Black Talk Radio Network community and look at it there as well.
Okay.
Just a heads up for you guys. But yeah, man, it's, there's fights happening on all fronts. And we know that it's not unusual for animal lovers to have more compassion for animals and be completely ignorant of human
They're not ignorant. They don't care. They don't care. Well, PETA is not ignorant of...
They ignore it.
Yeah, they're ignoring it. But here's a court case, though, that I was made aware of by L.A. Ramon, who was one of the donors that helped fund our abolitionist trip to D.C. But L.A. Ramon shared a very important article. I don't know if you included this, but let me just go ahead and mention it off top because it's very important. And it really didn't hit me how important or the significance depending upon a possible ruling from the SCOTUS if they first take the case, because they may not even take the case. But you got a guy in Louisiana. The article I read did not share the details on whether or not if he was convicted, but I'm imagining he was convicted, or else his lawyers wouldn't be bringing this lawsuit or bringing it to the Supreme Court, asking the Supreme Court to take the case. This is what the crust of the case is. In Louisiana and Oregon, the only two states out of all the states are the only ones that only require a 10-2 guilty verdict to put somebody into slavery. Every other state, including federal law, says there has to be a unanimous decision by a jury of 12. If there's two who won't agree with the verdict, then you have a hung jury, right? Not so in Oregon and Louisiana. And this kind of sheds some light or give me some insight, because for years we've been saying Louisiana has 7 times the prison population of China. We've talked about their 100% occupancy contracts that they have signed with Louisiana state legislatures. Excuse me, I'm talking about Correction Corporation of America, now known as Core Civic, with these 100% occupancy contracts. And if the beds aren't filled with slaves, then you still got to pay us. We're going to tax you for those. These are the contracts these people are. So, but then when I heard that all they needed was a 10-2 vote in favor of convicting someone, that also adds to why they have the world's largest captive slave labor force in the world. So those two states, and so the lawyers are arguing that their client is being deprived of equal protection under the law. I forgot what amendment that is in the Constitution, but it does talk about equal protection under the law. I thought it was the 14th. Yes. It might have been the 20th. I'm not sure. Somebody could look it up. I'm not certain about which amendment, but I know it's in there. So they're asking the Supreme Court to take this case. Now, if the Supreme Court takes this case and they rule in favor of the plaintiff, correct me if I'm wrong, brothers, but I assume that every person who has been put into slavery in Louisiana and Oregon on a 10-2 verdict should be granted relief on that ruling if they take the case, the SCOTUS that is, if they rule in this guy's favor, saying that this is depriving him of equal justice under the law, this jury law that these two states have is unconstitutional, that could bring relief to who knows how many, as well as those who've already gotten out who could challenge their convictions. Guys, your comments on that?
By the way, that is the 14th Amendment with the exception, with the Equal Protection Clause. And I was thinking they were kind of done in a package over about 9 months, I think, if I look back on the history of them. But the Equal Protection Clause is the 14th. I agree with you, Scotty. I saw that when you put it up earlier at lunchtime, and I started looking over it. You said the key part, though, whether or not SCOTUS takes it, because if they take it, it's going to open a can of worms, like you're saying, in both of those states, especially for people that got convicted on hearsay or just what do you call it, visual identification with no tangible evidence. They'll be the first ones to come up for some kind of appeal or redress, because they were, you know, the constitutional rights were already put upon. That's a lot of people. Just Angola alone, 16,000 inmates or 6,000 inmates on the plantation, and 70% of them are in there for life. It's a lot of people.
There's a lot to unpack in what you're talking about here, but let me start from the initial part. Just a FYI, the planning stage is just where we put all the information that is available that's going on recent. We don't always get to all of them. Oftentimes we might get to 20% of the stories that we really want to tell. But we put it up there so we have a record as abolitionists of what's going on during this period of time in the fight. So just throw whatever you want to have in there, and we could pick from like potpourri, you know what I mean, like a grab bag. Now, on to Louisiana. Louisiana is known as the prison capital of the world, no doubt about that. And also in the 1980s, if not one of the first private prisons to be sold on the open market, international open market, was introduced by Ronald Reagan, and it was a women's prison in Louisiana. As far as the contracts that they have, one of the biggest aspects of the Louisiana prison system is their jail systems in these parishes, where the sheriffs are like mini kings, and they use those parishes as for-profit industries, just, you know, storing bodies in there left and right. As a matter of fact, there are some prisons in Louisiana that are 80% black, 80% black, and in a state that doesn't even have a 50% black population. I believe they're incarcerated there. I mean, don't quote me, but if I remember correctly, it's like 6-1 in the state of Louisiana. And as far as the contracts with, I don't know if it's CCA or GEO. I think it's CCA now that they have their contracts with. Scotty is right, but I don't think they have the 100% in Louisiana. I think it's 80 to 100% that they have in Louisiana. So it's still, you know, not much of a difference. 80 to 100% guaranteed for the next 25 years in these prisons. And then when you talk about now we have to look at these cases that were tried 10-2. That again is a pack of worms. There's a lot of things to unpack in there. First of all, it's only 5% of the prison population that ever receives a trial. So we're talking about 5%.
Yeah, that's true. That's very important. Cases. That's true.
Right.
Yes. So it wouldn't be such a huge impact on getting so many people out because it's only 5% to start with. But when it does, then you have to also remember how they tricked us with the 13th Amendment. It went from slave to criminal with one amendment. And then they put us in a place with real criminals. And we're like, yo, how you going to tell the difference? We criminalize them and they already are criminals and they're all together. Now pick out the innocents. So you have cases where these 10 to 12 cases have went through courts where the people may be absolutely guilty. Like they murdered 25 people or raped 16 children or anything like that. And you don't just want to randomly let everybody go. That's dangerous. Somebody's going to die behind that.
But you know what, though, Max? Now, I understand your concern on that. But the Constitution is the Constitution. And if it's ruled that this was unconstitutional, no, we don't want to let those people go. But by law, you have to let them go. That's on the state for having such a law. So I understand your concern. I wouldn't want to see those people who are absolutely guilty too. But guess what? That's what will have to happen. Because you can't deny it to them if it's ruled unconstitutional. So, but you do bring up a lot of interesting points, like the fact this is another reason when people, I've never, well, let me say, yeah, I've never been in a position where I'm being offered a plea deal where I'm looking at life in prison or 5 years if I just plead guilty. I've never been in a situation like that. So I'm not judging anyone who's been put in that situation. But consider if everybody said, you know what, especially if you're innocent, I'm going to trial. Then you put so many other things in play. Number one, you're going to clog up the system. It might be 4, 5, 10 years before you even have a trial. Okay. Then also, I mean, you take away that as a tool of the system to badger people. And you also put into play jury nullification. Okay, because if I get on one of your juries, then especially if it's a drug crime, no victims, no violence, nothing. It's a consenting transaction between I'm voting not guilty. And that's another tool that I think we need to really spread more as abolitionists is jury nullification. Just cause the law says they're wrong doesn't make it wrong. They said the same thing about the Fugitive Slave Act. Yeah, these people guilty helping these human beings escape slavery. Well, guess what? Technically, they're in violation of the law, but guess what? I don't agree with the law, so I'm voting not guilty. We have that power. We have that right. How they gonna make you vote guilty? So, number of things there, but Max, you are correct. I understand your concerns, but I support this. I support a ruling in favor of this plaintiff.
I think I'm just going to sit back and watch for a while and see how these things unfold. You know, my main concern is to end slavery. I don't have all the answers. You know what I mean? But I can be a witness to it all as it unfolds.
But Max, we do have a caller who has unmuted themselves. They've been sitting there patiently for a while. Usually we go through our opening comments and we didn't mean to turn it into a segment, but that case is very, very deep, as Max pointed out. Many layers to this, many things to consider, so we didn't mean to take so long. But area code 704, did you want to chime in on anything here on New Abolitionist Radio tonight? Go ahead and announce yourself and go ahead with your question or comment.
Good evening, it's George Friday. I'm calling from North Carolina. I was in Greenville again at Chronic, and I'm happy to hear your voices, Scotty and Max, and Otis. I don't think I met you, but it's good to hear your voice too.
Nice to hear you.
Comments said, don't have much to add, except we absolutely have plenty of work to do.
Welcome to New Abolitionist Radio, Sister George. It's a pleasure to have you here. I've had the pleasure to be part of several human rights efforts with you, and I appreciate the efforts that you have put forth, and it's nice to hear your voice here. George has been involved in a move to amend the Constitution as well. George, did you want to say anything about that?
I could say as much as you'll let me. Move to Amend is a national coalition with the goal to have the 28th Amendment. The 28th Amendment would make it clear that corporations do not have constitutional rights and that money is not free speech. But a caveat or a bonus, as we're working on that 28th Amendment, is sitting with folks to look at and really, there's a word for it, I'm thinking about it, unpack, although that's not the right word, the current Constitution, which is the Constitution, which is the supreme law of our land that makes it fine to be a slave if you've been convicted as a crime, as y'all are talking about. But as that document is expanded to corporations, it gives corporations the right to overturn any community or people won victory in any arena that we could have right now.
Yes, that touches on nullifying Citizens United. I'm all for it because that put the campaign money with the Roberts courts. With Citizens United, just open it up. Corporations as persons and money as a vote, as speech.
That's absolutely it. I think that's your voice, Scotty. And what's important is that when you're, and one of the things I've learned from you, Max, is to be really clear about what is our organizing goal. We're not just trying to end horrible conditions in prisons, we're trying to end slavery by confronting the reality of what being in prison does and how it creates a working class of enslaved labor. But when it comes to the 28th Amendment, and as you mentioned, overturning Citizens United, that is not enough. Citizens United was voted in 2010, and it did give corporations constitutional right and constitutional standing, but corporations already had First Amendment rights. That was granted in 1978.
Yes.
So overturning Citizens United would only limit who could give the money. It wouldn't limit how much you could give, so it doesn't do enough, and it doesn't challenge all of those other parts of the Constitution that are not in keeping with human rights and civil rights.
Let me interject this.
We have to go for the big win and not, be really clear about what we're looking for. What is the goal and what is the problem, and try to really name it clearly. Learn that from you, Max. Thank you.
Now let me interject this because there is a constitutional convention that conservatives, libertarians, the Koch brothers, and most of those are involved in that. And with many of these states being in Republican control and the Trump administration supporting this constitutional convention, I think that it is imperative that, like I had mentioned this to Max when I looked at the program for Chronic 2017, and I saw that portion about amending the Constitution to address Citizens United to reverse the effect that it had. And I was a little disappointed, and I discussed that disappointment because I read, when I saw men, I have a men 13 in my mind so much because the young brother kept saying that when he was doing his poetry and telling us how, at the rally in D.C., a men 13, and Andrew standing out there in that hot sun with his sign, saying a men 13. So I was a little disappointed. I was like, man, there was no workshop on amending the 13 for the Constitution, although we did cover that in our presentation on Radio Free America and the Prison Industrial Complex. So I've gotten emails. I've been well aware of that movement to address the 28th Amendment. But what I'm thinking is that we need to get those who want to amend the 13th, those who want to amend the 28th, to address citizens. We need to combine forces because this constitutional convention is going to happen. Now, like she said, supreme law of the land, whatever they come out with, if it get ratified. Now, do we want to be standing on the outside of that convention with signs in our hands and our private parts? Or do we want to be in on shaping the new Constitution? Because that's exactly what we're talking about. I'll toss that out there for you all.
You're 100% right, because Citizens United really is tailored toward campaign contributions. What she talked about from 1978, I got introduced to through Texas, is the power that they have to go to court and usurp whatever happens to the public. And what the other part is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. That has been used throughout the civil rights struggle. So we don't want to be outside with placards. It's just like you said, we want to be in there. That's why on a couple of months ago when Max brought it up, that's what I was saying. We have to be in when they do the planning and structure of this, because I've seen several things where they've already had planning committees with the Koch brothers, and I'm saying, we don't want that, because that's how we got ALEC as the American Legislature Exchange Council. That's how we got lobbyists running all over DC, because corporations have rights. So we want to be there when they plan this thing and actually be participants at the table, not outside with placards.
I got to go into detail with this and learn a lot about it. Maybe George doesn't know what's going on, what we're talking about here. So let me let you know, and the listeners know, because this may be a pivotal moment in history right now, happening right now, with the movement that you're involved in and the organizational skills that you're using. This could be the vehicle not only that you could use to turbocharge your movement, but also to break the ice and get us in this position of negotiation where our constitutional rights are also being represented, because right now they aren't. There's this thing called the Convention of States that's going on, George.
Right.
And the Convention of States is using an Article 5 of the Constitution in order to amend the Constitution or change it. They've got a lot of Republican backing, a lot of Tea Party backing. As Scotty said, they're funded by these billionaires that you were talking about who are using their voice through Citizens United. And there is no representation of minorities pretty much at all. And it's filled with a lot of white racist supremacist people who are literally working towards opening the Constitution up for reinterpretation. They need less than 36 states to be able to make this happen. And in the course of the last 3 years, they've gotten over 12 now, 12 states. So it's a third of the way there already. The other way to amend the Constitution, which is a constitutional convention, could take years if we even began that. But this is already in play. The only thing that's not there is representation from people like yourself, from people like us, who also have amendments that we would like to propose. I've seen as many as 13 amendments that have already been submitted for this, and none of them address any of our concerns. And also, the money that's behind this movement right now is pointing to those very people that you're fighting against. They're financing changing the Constitution. So I don't know if you were familiar of that, but I did do an interview with Eddie Conway on the Real News Network, and I just put the interview up on New Abolitionists Radio's Facebook page in case anybody wants to look more into it. I'm no expert on what's happening, but I've studied it enough now to know where they're going with it and what they're trying to achieve.
You're right. There is a move to move things to the right. That's not new. And the Koch brothers aren't new either. And given, from my point of view, given how obscenely rich they are in terms of being able to spend money to get what they want, I'm surprised they don't have more than 12 states. I frankly don't think they'll get there. And part of our work with Move to Amend and our affiliates, which are people who are organizing on the ground in many states, and the folks who signed onto our website, I think we've got around 400,000 or more. Those folks would be described probably as progressive liberals or Democrats. Some of them are independent, and a few are libertarian. And those folks get very, very nervous about this kind of Article 5 convention because they think it'll be run to the right and, lots of rights and liberties will be taken away. I'm not concerned about that because those same people, those same folks that believe in what Move to Amend is doing, that are way too old and way too white and way too male, given the whole demographic numbers, they can fill those rooms, because I'm not trying to go in those spaces. But we've done fantastic political education with our members. Every affiliate group is required to do movement education. And in that movement education, they learn about past movements of struggle, the women's suffragist movement, civil rights movement, labor movement, the early abolitionist movement, and information about what's going on with the 13th and organizing currently is part of what they have to learn in addition to anti-oppression and anti-racist skills, so that they, as white people, can organize around these issues and make traction, often in spaces where we're not at the table, but we could be on the menu. And it's their job to make sure we're not on the menu. And it's our job as the leaders of Move to Amend to hold those folks accountable and support them in doing the work. I think that's a relatively effective strategy. We've had some good success with that strategy, including getting resolutions passed in counties in Wisconsin where it's super white majorities and super Republican, and there's active Klan chapters there. But we've gotten things passed there because folks are successfully working against the tide. I think that's required.
What type of things are you saying that you got done? I'm just curious.
They are passing resolutions in their counties that are standing up for the 28th Amendment that say corporations don't have constitutional rights, money isn't free speech.
Okay, and I get that, and I just want to interject this. I don't have them right here, but I've been doing the same thing Max has been. I can tell you right now that just about 6 weeks ago, the Republicans had a big gathering over this constitutional convention. And they are split now between the Freedom Caucus that's in the House and less far to the right Republicans. So they couldn't even come together. Rance Priebus is one of the people involved in it, and that just left the White House. They can't even agree now on the procedure they want to use and the rules for participants in this convention. So they say they're going to table it until later in 2018 because the GOP couldn't get this the bill through the House, the ACA. So I don't know if I can agree with you on not wanting to be in those spaces, because that's what's going to end up happening. What they're trying to work on is to nullify the power of states and localities to exclude corporations. As a matter of fact, one of the key things about it is animal processing animals and what do you call it, factory farming. That's one of the key issues they're looking at. So I go along with you doing the grassroots work, but like Max says, we're going to have to come together in a group that you can have sections working on a specific thing, because that's what these people are doing. These people own everything from the Heritage Corporation, American Enterprise Institute, the Cato Institute. They fund money for Exxon Mobil. So they have, matter of fact, I just read an article, 17 different think tanks operate from Koch and Mercer money alone. 17 separate ones.
And they have been for a long time. They're a total mess. So and
that's
given how much money they have and how much influence they act like they have, they're not any further than they are. I'm happy for them to fight amongst themselves and take each other out.
This is where
we need to be working to get to their level. So when they make those rules, we're there.
This is where I am on it. And I've stated this when we first started talking about this on the program. I help them get there. I help them organize. I want it to happen. That's the quickest way. Because it's going to happen, I feel. Well, let me put it this way. I don't want to chance that they won't get it together and do it all on their own, because we're talking about something very serious. All right. And so even if it's to put a quote unquote monkey wrench in a plan, we can't even do that if we don't have a seat at the table. So, I mean, to get the things that I want, this is a negotiation process. Sometimes you have to sit down with your enemies, your political enemies and whatnot, and you have to negotiate. So I would not feel comfortable with having a bunch of right-wingers, right-leaning, neo-Nazi fascists all in a room that has the possibility to come out with a new constitution that is going to strip our liberties. So they can't deny us a seat at the table. That would expose it. Then if we tried to get in and they prevented us from getting in, then we could point to the people and say, point them out to the people and say, see, this is a sham. This is a sham. They're being exclusionary. They don't consider us all Americans. They're telling us so we will not abide by whatever. But I'm saying if we can get in there, we can get those. We can negotiate those things. I just don't want to chance it because, like Otis laid out, there's a lot of money behind this. And they are the reason. They are the reason.
One more thing on that.
But Otis, let me just say this and I'll wrap up. But Otis, you mentioned Alec earlier, and we've been following Alec for years. These are the people that's writing this quote-unquote mass incarceration legislation, bringing in the state representatives to teach them how to go back and push it through, and then they push it through at the state level. These people have power. They ain't playing. And so I don't want to chance something like that going down. Go ahead, Otis.
Well, I was going to say, Michael caused them to get Sister George to understand what I'm saying. A perfect example, one of the last cities that's under a consent agreement done by Obama's administration with Lynch is Baltimore. Baltimore just got jacked up by a federal judge who actually has a history of supposedly being good with black people. They are trying to get community policing oversight. They went through the whole procedure. They let them be one of the last 2 people in the process. And then the judge sit down and use a completely different committee of oversight and excluded the black people who had applied. I'm going to put it up on New Abolitionists because I don't want to try to go through all the details. But the interesting thing was these black people had covered all their bases. A black federal judge actually retired early and came on board with them so they would have the proper legal advice. They went through getting all of the tech stuff together. They had the staffing, the IT, and everything. And this federal judge went against the whole consent decrees mandates and put together his own commission, which ended up doing away with all of the work that the Department of Justice had done when they came in and talked to the community. So after going through the right legal process, they got usurped, and the people still don't have a say on what this commission will do. And right now they're trying to decide if they're going to actually go to court and appeal it, because it was set up so good until the city of Baltimore has to pay something like $1.5 million to set this commission up. And a white judge comes in and excludes the only black group that was qualified to do it. I'll put it up and show you. So we can't afford to not be at the table because we can't trust the legal system. We have to have representatives at the table.
If I might chime in.
I agree with you, absolutely.
Patrick.
I absolutely agree with you. I said I didn't want to be the person. I believe in strategic use of privilege, which means I will help prep the people who need to be there, and I will hold them accountable to doing what they need to do. But I don't have to put myself through that torture.
Yeah, I understand.
My mental and spiritual health is way more important. Same reason I won't shop in certain places or hang out with certain people.
No, you're straight. I'm with you on that.
On September 24th, there's going to be an organizing conference call with the Millions for Prisoners Human Rights March group, and some of these things will be brought to the table. And I will be bringing that to the table of conversation and maybe for organizing for us to act upon it, as well as removing the exception clauses from the state's constitutions as a priority for us to move forward with the federal aspect of that. But I would like to offer my perspective on the Constitution of States. This is a legal way, a constitutional way for us to do exactly what we've been wanting to do, whether it's to amend the 13th or amend the 28th. It's a process for all people to do, regardless of color, if you're an American citizen. And here they are basically making it a white-run circumstance, predominantly with, as I said before, Tea Party organizers and billionaires who really don't give a damn about the black community or black issues. And it's dangerous for us not to get involved with it. Actually, in my perspective, I think this is an opportunity for us to do what Scotty said and work with our enemies, because this is the vehicle that we're supposed to work with and not just let them have it. So we could bring these to the table. We would have a head start already with 12 states already signed on, and we could help them get this done as long as we're at the table to make sure that they don't, do the things that would lead to what did those racist white supremacists say recently? The Spencer guy, concentration camps. We don't want to see that come into play. So this is a way for us to push this forward quicker with 12 states already on board, and I kind of like that. The Constitutional Convention could take us as much as another 6 to 10 years just to get it in play. This one is already there. So for time purposes, I think that's important that we get involved with this. I was recently studying artificial intelligence and looking through all the different presentations about artificial intelligence. And there was one thing that I noticed in particular through my viewing and reading these articles, is that every voice that was represented, every voice that was talking about artificial intelligence, whether it was warnings or the pros and the cons, were all white European people. There was no black faces involved. So here we are talking about something that could literally change life on earth as we know it, and there is no black people involved in this. They had an argument between two computers over the meaning of God and what is the purpose of life. And these were the questions that were being fed to them by these European programmers and developers, and on and on and on. If it had been somebody black at that represented in that situation, maybe they might have said, well, computer, how do we end colonialism? How do we end slavery? How do we end poverty? Instead, they're asking them, you know, do you believe in God? So when you don't have particular voices in there, you're leaving out their perspectives and their concerns completely and putting everything, which affects the entire world, into just these European hands. They did that same crap when they risked the whole damn globe trying to recreate a black hole at CERN's Institute. You got all these Europeans going over there, well, it's just the world, we can risk it, and nobody else's voices are allowed. So I'm just saying, we have that same circumstance here. It's called racism by omission. They keep your voice out, and that's what they're doing right now with the Convention of States. I'm sorry I went on a tangent, but I just wanted to express how I see this in every system of control that's going on, whether it be the corporate world with CEOs, and hardly any of them are really black CEOs on an international level, or scientists and physicists, where, you know, you see a lot of Tyson DeGrasse, but you don't see him involved in none of these think tanks like that, you know?
You're 100% right. I mean, I do construction, and I've done a lot of commercial stuff too. When they first came out with automatic hand washers, turn on your spigots in public bathrooms, they had never used black skin, so it was hard for black people to make them work. The first ones we put into the Meyerson Center back in 1984, 85, didn't work. I had to go through and replace them all because they had to tweak the system. They had never used black hands to turn them on. White boy, I could walk up to them and once we install them and run everything, I could walk up to them and do it, and it wouldn't work. And the white boy walk up and stick his hand under it. They ended up taking out like 40 or 50 of them. So, I mean, it's just on the basics, they leave us out. So imagine what they're going to do on something complex.
Right, exactly. It's very dangerous, and we can't keep allowing this to happen. You know, we're concerned about the wrong things sometimes. Like I saw a brother today who's a Trump supporter. He's all worried about the Bilderbergers, like he got some wealth they're trying to steal. Like, where's your billions, brother? They after your billions? You 100-aire. Lucky if you're 1,000-aire. And you're worried about the Bilderbergers. Like, really? You know, and that's because we follow the concerns of people who aren't concerned with our lives. You know, we're out here fighting to end slavery. But if you look at the Declaration of Human Rights abbreviated, you'll see that slavery is number 4 on the list. And I talked about that at the Millions for Prisoners Human Rights March on Washington. That's what happens when you let people who don't know what your problems are, they don't understand it, they never experienced it, but they've got the solutions for you. And that's how slavery ends up being the number 4 issue in order of priorities, with things like right not to be discriminated against, or equality ahead of slavery. Like, you could actually do that. Like, you could have equality with slavery, or you could have a lack of discrimination with slavery. It makes no damn sense. But that's how we end up in those types of positions. That's why you can go to the Democratic website right now, the Republican website, the Libertarian website, the Socialist website, any damn website of these political industries that you want, and you won't find anything at all about the 13th Amendment. At all. Nothing. They pretend it don't exist. Well, there you have it. Any comments?
Yeah, Max. Yeah, I mean, that's a very deep issue. And so, I mean, I think it was worth the time we just devoted to that one topic. But yeah, I do want to let the listeners know that you can join the conversation by giving us a call at 866-510-9025. That's 866-510-9025. Hit ** on your telephone keypad. Just watch your background noise, and it pretty much open lines. Can we get into Chronic 2017? met some people there. It was a very positive experience for me, being my first type conference that I ever attended in that manner. So yeah, I had a very positive experience. I learned some things. I'm gonna have to do some checking on some things, because again, as I stated at the beginning of the program, the doctor said that within 2 years cannabis will be legalized. And now that workshop was in the context of cannabis and health. That's why you had a medical doctor giving this workshop, and he was actually here from North Carolina. But he mentioned that he said that, and I'm like, okay, I pretty much pay attention to politics, because I do a political social news program every day, 5 days a week, and then on Wednesday nights as well, twice on Wednesday. So I just don't see that in the tea leaves, especially with Jeff Sessions there. But I'm thinking automatically the impact that it would have on freeing victims of modern day slavery and human trafficking. And I'm like, that's a big deal. But I don't believe it, so we'll see. Maybe he got some insider knowledge, but correct me guys if I'm wrong, but I believe cannabis is probably the most used drug in the world, if not the United States. I've read material in the past that said that if you just legalize cannabis, which is 60% of the drug cartels illicitly gain profits, you would pretty much put them out of business just by legalizing, regulating, and taxing cannabis. But again, my focus has always been on how many people that were free. So I believe that most people are in prison for behind drug possession. Thoughts on chronic, Max, or anybody else?
Is I did run across an article stating that 2 of the largest tobacco manufacturers in the U.S. have already started packaging their marijuana in the very same equipment they use to package cigarettes.
I may have seen that.
They know something we don't know, because they're having problems in Colorado, Washington, and I think in New Hampshire. There's 3 states are upset because the tobacco industry has kind of come in with their own packaging ideas.
North Carolina based tobacco companies. Reynolds,
if they're involved in it, that's big money.
Yeah, Phillips, Reynolds.
I think what the doctor talked about at Chronic is different than recreational use of cannabis.
Yeah, it was about health.
I've got my book here, and one of the things he's talking about are cannabinoids, which is in cannabis, the flowers, but there are other ways to get the healing properties of cannabinoids without having the recreational use of the flowers or the bud, as we call them. So I think you might be right that it's unlikely that across the country the recreational use of cannabis flowers will be legal, in part because it might open up an industry that people could make money besides just the the tobacco industry. But cannabinoid oils are available now, and they could be shipped across the country legally. And that's just for healing purposes. So I think that could have some progress in 2 years. I'm agreeing with you. I don't think in North or South Carolina we could walk into a shop like they do in Washington State or Colorado or what other states and purchase flowers.
Right.
I don't think that, and I don't know how long it'll last in those states if if people like Jeff Sessions stay in power.
Yeah, I think the way that we're going right now, we could cherry pick parts of the cannabinoid plant and use it for different things, whether it be for medical purposes or depression, cancer, whatever parts that they can use. You might even use it for commercial or industrial purposes, the hemp itself. But I can't imagine marijuana or cannabis as something that you can get high off being legal across America in the next 2 years. Not at all. The biggest opponent of that at this point right now is the, again, Koch-backed prison guard unions and police unions who are fighting hard against legalizing marijuana.
Yes.
They're fighting real hard against that, and that's because it makes a hell of a lot of money in the Justice Department. Just last year, we had more people arrested for personal possession of marijuana than all violent crimes combined. So what are you going to do with that money? It's going to be missing if you legalize it. And that's the biggest stepping stones that we have right now to legalization. I mean, it's a damn plant. I ain't never heard of nobody overdosing on it, and I've seen nothing but good things come from people who use it for health purposes. So the only purpose that I can imagine that they keep it illegal is because it generates billions and billions of dollars within the criminal justice process.
Now, again, I believe our guest is it George Friday? Is that your name, ma'am? Okay. Now,
George Friday.
You have the paperwork there from Chronic, and I believe that's where I read it. I think I left my copy at Max's. I'm not sure where it's at. But I'm saying, I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, and I think that's where I read, because again, I was not there for the full workshop because we had car trouble and we're late. And I just got to talk to him for about 20 minutes and listen to him. But I think it's mentioned in those materials that cannabis is a protected plant, and that is people that's not protected, obviously, because they've criminalized it. And so that was interesting to me, and I didn't have an opportunity to really go into that, but I believe that's what it said, was that it's a protected plant internationally, whatever that means. What does that mean? You can't exterminate it, you can't use Agent Orange on it or Roundup.
It doesn't use the word protection, but it does say that it's the king of the plant world when it comes to cannabinoids, that cannabinoids are antioxidants, in some ways like vitamins, and it also says that international law lists 50 plants that are essential for health and nutrition. Cannabis is one of them, and protected by such laws, but not people. So that's what it is in the workshop description here.
I thought so.
International law. So I don't know if that's the UN or wherever it is, but it just says international law lists 50 plants that are essential for health and nutrition. Cannabis is one of those plants.
And they put so many.
Scotty, we're running
slavery.
up on a break time.
Yes.
And I just want to point out that if anybody wants to support what George Friday is doing right now, there's a petition on New Abolitionist Radio. I think that's associated with what you're doing from MoveOn.org, where the 28th Amendment, 35 states and counting. Is that supportive of what you're doing there, George?
Amend, not move on. Move to amend, all spelled out, MOVETOAMEND.org.
All right, so you can find that on New Abolitionist Radio. We'll make sure that that's up there for people to participate in this. We're about 1 minute away from our break. So, Scott, you want to take it early?
Yes, sir.
All right. When we come back on the other side, I want to share a couple of experiences that I had during Chronic 2017. You're listening to New Abolitionist Radio here on BlackTalkRadioNetwork.com. We'll be right back after these messages.
Radio since 2008, providing new black media for the masses. Welcome back to New Abolitionist Radio. If you're on the line with us and you'd like to make a question or comment, just press star on your phone there to unmute yourself and chime in, state your name and comment where you come calling from. And unless we have anybody that's ready to do that, I'll share one or two of my experiences at Chronic 2017. Scotty, is the lines open with anybody? Nope. Okay, all good. All right, well, one of the things that I if you know me, you know I'm pretty one-dimensional. You know what I mean? Like, you know what to expect from me. Like,
George said, I try to be very clear and narrow-minded in what I'm trying to accomplish and focus on it, you know. And I'm over-analytical to a fault. I'm paranoid, and I'm brutally honest. My superpower is blurting. I will just say something. You know what I mean? That's my superpower. I just blurt things out, and it blows stuff up. So while I was there, I got to experience a few of the workshops and, you know, the gathering of people coming together, trying to unify as one in these causes, like the Workers' Union, for instance, and the Islamic groups now who are facing discrimination and what they call is a version of racism, all coming together trying to have ideas on how we can make this stronger and grow it bigger and accomplish things that are more solid and long-lasting. We even had at the end of the event a list where people put down the objectives that they expect to be able to achieve by 2018's chronic. By the way, this was my second one. So I think I exceeded what I wanted to accomplish from 2016 in 2017. But like, you know, we had to come up with ideas of what we want to see get done. So one of the workshops that I went to was on Islamophobia and racism in the United States. And it's with a brother, George, what was his name again? I want to give him credit. What was it? Mansour. Yes, Mansour. Brother Mansour. It's a good guy, man. You know what I mean? And I'm sitting there listening to the explanation of where he's going with this. And he's tying in Islamophobia with racism and comparing the two. But in my ears, and I'm not trying to be insulting or anything like that, but in my ears, I'm hearing, look, y'all, like I've heard so many times in different other groups, they are treating us like black people. We need your help right now. And I had to point out at a couple of occasions, like, why are we separating our arguments? Like, we're fighting the same enemy, but we're separating it into different components and departments and groups that are all struggling to try to get their objectives done or solve their problems. But the overall problem has always been racism, white supremacy in the form of slavery. You know what I mean? It's always seemed to be that problem. And he even got to the point where he explained that in France, for example, 70% of the prison population there are Muslims. And I had to point it out also so people know that they're North Africans too. They're black Muslims. I mean, if you took the Muslim away, it would just be 70% of France's prison population are black. And that seems to be the main theme going on all around here. And he explained to me that was his purpose. He was trying to show how these things are all connected. And I'm in agreement with that. But I just want to make it clear from my perspective, we are divided way too much. As Abiodun Oyewole has always taught me, they don't divide and conquer. They conquer the divided. We're dividing ourselves. You know, we went through the same thing with the gay rights in order for them to be able to, you know, have the right for marriage and insurance through their spouses and things like that. It was like, yo, come on out and help us. And that huge crowd that was out there that could have got anything they wanted done in the whole wide world after they got their goals achieved, dispersed. They were gone. And we're still out here fighting with just remnants of them left. But they are not coming out for us like we came out for them. I see that too often, and it bothers me. We need this help right now. Slavery, not some damn pretend slavery, real slavery is happening. And anything you can think of during chattel slavery times is happening in 2017. Whatever your imagination can come up with, I can show you an example of it today happening legally through this system of injustice that we have. We don't need comparisons. We don't need departments. We're fighting one demon that's been around for as long as any of us can remember, and it's called slavery. And we made the mistake of not ever putting any guards to protect us from it when we thought we abolished the last time. And this is the manifestation of it today, with 15 million people going through prisons and jails in one single year. In comparison, at the height of chattel slavery, only 4 million people were free. Now we've got 15 million, and everybody acts like it's a secondary effect, like it's like not that important, that insurance is more important than this. And, you know, all of these different things, garbage collection is more important than this. And that bothers me often. So I usually blurt something out like that and point it out. But at the end of the thing, we were on the same page about what we were dealing with.
Well, Max,
And next, I want to remind you that one of the reasons Mansour uses that analogy is that it is a fact that without the racism, Islamophobia wouldn't have. It's used as one of the anchors that people rest Islamophobia on. And the reason that the prison population in France is because we're talking about black and brown people. If they were white, they wouldn't be treating them that way. And that's why the racism and Islamophobia are hand in hand. A number of people who are Muslim are also people of African descent, African American, or from African countries. That's something that's usually pointed out in these talks that Mansour gives.
Yeah,
and part of it is making it clear it is all rooted in anti-black racism, which is the term Mansour uses. Anti-black racism is the reason Islamophobia exists. If there wasn't racism, there wouldn't be Islamophobia. And that's a different description than gay rights, because if there wasn't racism, there would still be homophobia and heterosexism. That wouldn't go away.
Max, I thought that was a very great observation of yours to point out that if you took the religious label away, that it would be black people. It would be 70%. Very astute observation in the way to point out that it doesn't seem that those individuals' problem is Islamophobia, although that climate exists, but their primary the primary problem the system has with them and why it's targeting them is because they're black. And as I have often argued, my study shows that we ask this question: which came first, the chicken or the egg? So I apply that same question to which came first, racism or slavery. In my study here in the United States, based on the United States, because even the Romans enslaved other Caucasians, what will be classified as Caucasian. Now back then they didn't have racial classifications like they implemented here in the United States. Okay, but it wasn't the terms of your enslavement. You weren't targeted because of your skin color, but more or less because of what region you lived in and what tribe you belonged to, and whether or not you was going to resist their occupation and colonization. So anybody could become a slave. But here in the United States, there's been some debate about whether or not the Irish were ever enslaved, but if you go to Bacon's Rebellion and if you go to Virginia colonies history in law, that's the first time that you had the slave codes, or the first time that racism was introduced in legislation. Again, this is not the United.
You're right.
This is not the United States yet. This is still British colonies. And Virginia was the first one to implement, I think it was the slave codes of 1601. I can't remember exactly right now, but it was passed in the mid to late 1600s. And that's where it it took away the Second Amendment, what we know today as the Second Amendment right, the right to bear arms, from free black people who were not enslaved. So the whole purpose of introducing institutional racism was to keep slavery going after Bacon's Rebellion, where you had poor, peasant, indentured, enslaved, possibly white, what we know as white people, who banded together with the other people who are being enslaved, regardless of skin color. And the people who want to keep slavery going then introduced that legislation and gave the Europeans, now classified as white, jobs as slave catchers, plantation overseers, police. We know them today as prison guards. And so I say it's even in the case of Islamophobia, the way they're using it now, okay, is because of slavery. So racism, Islamophobia, tentacles of slavery, all of that's coming from, I see tentacles of slavery. But I want to say this to any Muslims, because we do got Muslim brothers and sisters who are abolitionists out there. what y'all need to do about Libya, where they got open slave markets and they're targeting African migrants fleeing the war-torn, destabilized lands by the Europeans. These did this to them, and these people looking for jobs and safety, trying to make it to Europe, migrate to Europe, and they getting snatched up in Libya and sold into slavery. So them Muslims doing that. So let me just leave that on the table.
Right, Scotty.
You're right. You're right, Scotty. As a matter of fact, I think we've been on a couple of threads on Facebook where people debate on whether or not Gaddafi, what his impact was. But Gaddafi wasn't allowing that to go on when he was in charge of Libya. They had rules and laws against that. It's only once the U.S. went in and destabilized that country that was reintroduced. Matter of fact, even black refugees trying to escape famine are enslaved there. So they become victims even though they're running from Yemen and everywhere else. So, and that's what's wrong with an imperialistic United States. They go in and destabilize countries, and the people who usually suffer the most are the black people.
Yeah, exactly. It's always the same way. They do just conquer the divided. We're split into so many different groups, and some of us aren't even fighting for the same thing. Like some are fighting for privileges, others are fighting for rights.
You said you had a second experience, Max, and I would like to, the final get together on Sunday. That was really beautiful. Where we could leave some final thoughts. But I thought the question that was asked about after you spoke about slavery, and the gentleman in the crowd in the purple dashiki, I love that dashiki, bro. He asked the question, well, what can we do? What practical things, I'm paraphrasing, what practical things can we do not to fund our own oppression? Go ahead into your second experience, and I do want to play that video clip that you posted of the video that I made, to answer that question for the wider audience.
Actually, my second experience ties into yours. I had the pleasure to have a one-on-one conversation with the current president, former president of labor union there, local labor union, I believe dock workers or some such. George will probably clear it up. I don't have my information in front of me either. But in any case, we got to talking about potentially presenting a resolution before the union, and some of the unions are 95% black, 85% black, and presenting a resolution before them to not only support the move to amend the 13th Amendment, but also to divest as a union from construction investments in private prison constructions. And I explained to them how even the teachers union has as much as $100 million collectively invested in the construction of private prisons. And those are conflicts of interest. So if you're out here fighting as a labor union member to be able to have, your rights and the benefits and things like that, one of the biggest threats to you is prison labor, where people are doing jobs for pennies on the dollar. And the best way to get rid of that, first of all, is the amend the 13th so we can start ending that. And then secondly, by divesting. You shouldn't have your money invested in the construction of prisons. It's shooting yourself in the foot. So they're going to talk about that amongst the union members and leadership to put forth some proposals or resolutions to divest from these prison industries collectively. And I pointed out to them that so far in the career here we've had of New Abolitionist Radio, we've seen as much as $6 billion already be divested from these prison industries. And once we get that movement going more and more, the next step is just to hold the banks accountable who provide them with their money. Scotty?
Yeah, and I do want to point out that that was mainly a student-led movement to divest, because that was through universities, one in California. Where is Columbia at? Isn't that here on the East Coast?
Columbia University in New York.
Yes, and those were student-led efforts. So whenever I hear people bad-mouthing young people and saying, they have lost their way or they're not involved and they're not concerned about things, I have to just bring that up. How much have you accomplished in divesting from modern day slavery and human trafficking? So, you know, maybe you need to get your news and information from somewhere else, because I do know the corporate stream media likes to plant those generalizations and stereotypes in our mind about young people. And then also, you know, young people, y'all had to stop acting like us older people, and I don't consider myself old at 50 years old, but act like we don't have anything to share with you that you can use. Okay, so yes, the man, I don't know his name again. I didn't attend all the workshops, and but he was there with his wife. His wife was in one of my classes, matter of fact. And
you may be talking about Lawrence, I think. Yes,
and he had on the purple dashiki. I love that dashiki, man. Reminds me of the 70s when I was wearing dashikis to school. But he asked the question that the Max had spoke, and was bringing up that slavery has to be on your list. That got to be at the top of your list. If you organizing, you know, to end something or to address something, slavery's got to be on the list. And so the gentleman asked the question, well, what can we do, you know, in the area of economics to stop funding our own oppression? And so I had an opportunity to answer him, and I'm sorry, I'm running behind because my system is running kind of slow. I've been broadcasting all day, and my browser is moving a little slow, but I'm gonna get to the video. So I was thinking about that positive experience and just how simple it is for each and every one of us. There's just absolutely no excuse. We can do this. This is easy compared to some other challenges that we face. But so I made this video, what can I do to help end prison slavery, for those who weren't in the room and did not hear my response to the gentleman's very important question. So let me go ahead and load that up for you. It should be starting here shortly. Okay, turn up the volume. And we are also streaming live to YouTube right now, so just give it a second. It should start up here. Greetings, fam. Scotty Reed here, Black Talk Media Project, Black Talk Radio News. I just attended the conference, the Chronic 2017 conference, which is an annual human rights conference. Chronic stands for Carolina's Human Rights Organizing Conference, and it went the whole weekend from Friday to Sunday. And after the conference concluding, everybody came together and, you know, just basically summarizing or expressing some of the things that may not have been expressed before. But there was a question about, well, how do we stop funding our own oppression? And this was in the context of them hearing about abolitionism and abolishing 21st century slavery and human rights. And they were saying, okay, so the United States is practicing slavery via the 13th Amendment. We have all of these different corporations and industries that's tied into prison slave labor, the new slavery during this current period, post 1865. And so, but what can we do? And that's a powerful question when you ask the question, what can you do? And people should have some solutions. I mean, it doesn't take a very insightful person to state a problem. We all recognize some of these problems, but you should have at least a solution, something for people to take action on that information that you're relaying to them. And in this case, slavery was never abolished. So I answered the man's question, great question, and I said right now as an individual, each one of us can stop putting deposits or having checking and savings accounts with banks that are involved in underwriting private prison slavery or invested in private prison slavery. In the case of Wells Fargo, which is the second largest investor and holding stock in the GEO Group, which is a international private prison enslaver. So that's something you can do. You can look for one of the banks or a credit union that is not underwriting, helping to fund the day-to-day operations of these private prison companies, or they are invested in purchasing the stock. That's your responsibility not to do, because I'm trying to remember the other banks, but just Google, you're looking for an article, the 6 banks involved in supporting prison slavery, something to that effect. You'll find the different companies. So, you know, we can divest. We can have that conversation with our pastor. Ain't no pastor or no cleric or nobody's going to lead me when they are not even aware that when they take the deposits of the tithes and offerings supposed to be God or to the church to help the church with its mission, but you're putting those deposits on a private prison, slavery investing bank. Come on. And we've had those conversations with individuals, and they just aren't willing to lead those banks. But that is part of the solution. You know, also coupled with that, we need to spread awareness, which is the intent of this video, that slavery still exists. Whenever somebody like Jamie Dimon, the CEO of Chase Manhattan, is speaking somewhere and it's publicized ahead of time, you know, he's going to give this public speech at a college or at a chamber of commerce, we need to be outside with signs protesting and pointing out that whatever company that person represents is invested in modern day slavery and human trafficking as part of the public awareness campaign. So protesting does have its places. So we need to be doing that. Wherever these people are speaking, we need to be outside letting people know what they represent. And that's modern day slavery and human trafficking, profiting off of it. All right, so great question. I had a great time at the Carolinas Human Rights Organizing Conference, and I'm looking forward to next year, which I think may be held in Charlotte, but of course that could change. All right, so that's something that you as an individual can do. Have that conversation with your pastor. How you gonna be representing Christ and you helping these people, put people into slavery? Simply, and the simple thing you can do is not deposit money with that particular bank. All right, this has been Scotty Reed, host of BTR News, also host of New Abolitionist Radio, and the founder of Black Talk Media Project. Peace to the abolitionists, death to the oppressors, as one of my abolitionist comrades, Yohanan, would say. Peace.
Great reply, Scotty. I have provided the link to the list of 6 banks on New Abolitionist Radio for anyone that wants to check it out. As a matter of fact, when I say we have seen divestments of $6 billion from private prison industry, of that divestment came from the city of Seattle, who took $3 billion out of Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo has been practicing or profiting off of slavery and human trafficking since as far back as the 1800s.
Your audio went out for a second, Max. We have you back. The last thing we heard was Wells Fargo's involvement in slavery since when? The 1700s? I'm not.
Since the 1800s.
1800s, yeah.
1800s, yes.
Yeah, prior to 1865, 1850s, I believe.
And it's something that simple. Just take your money out of their banks. Collectively, we can do that. It don't cost you nothing. Just recognize that your money in that bank is supporting death and enslavement. And all you got to do is go and say you want to take it out. So divestment programs and physically taking your money out of these banks. So go to New Abolitionist Radio on Facebook and check it out there. You'll see the list of 6. Well, Scotty, we had a ton of stories. And for those that are listening, if you want to check out all these stories that we've reviewed this week, just go to New Abolitionist Radio and click the planning page link right there, and it'll take you to all of those stories that we have been reviewing throughout the week. We can't get through all of them, but believe me when I say we've looked at all of them. We're aware of these things occurring, and you should be too. Some of the headlines, for instance, an important one and an accomplishment that I would like to say we have achieved now within the injustice system is the acting Brooklyn DA Eric Gonzalez has dismissed 143,500 old summon warrants that subjected residents to arrest. Some of these warrants were over 10 years old, and people were walking on eggshells, living in conditions where they couldn't pay what they had built up to, and knew if they got caught, they were going to prison over unpaid fines and summons from 10 years ago. So they've dismissed 144,000 of those, basically. So shout out to DA Eric Gonzalez, acting Brooklyn DA, that is. That's one of the stories that you might want to check out.
Yeah, that's very important. That's very important, Max, because stop and frisk. Why do you think they were stopping and frisking a lot of people? I mean, the obvious reason is to put them in the pipeline of slavery, but they knew that you don't think the slave catchers had that information as well. You know what I'm saying? So they were like, hey, if we just stop all this, chances are they got a warrant for something minor, and who knows, it could escalate and we can choke them out like Eric Gardner on the concrete.
Right. You could end up dead. At the very least, you could lose your job, your house, everything. All it takes is 1 week in jail and you could lose everything for most people. It's as simple as that. So check that story out. Also check out the story about what's happening in Los Angeles with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy that was arrested for basically raping prison women, raping women in jail. When I tell you that there is everything that was happening in chattel slavery is happening right now in 2017, that's one example of it right there. You've got these enslaved women who are subject to your authority, and what are you doing? Raping them as a freaking chief. So that's one right there. And also in St. Louis, another cop got away with murder after saying he was going to murder a man on tape. He turned around and did it, and he walked away scot-free recently. And St. Louis is up in arms right now. And to make matters even worse, the St. Louis Police Department were marching through the streets chanting, "Whose streets? Our streets," among a number of other offensive terms. I mean, whose streets? Slave catchers' streets. Talk about fascism. Check out that story. And then there's another one where a GOP lawmaker flipped out because she got pulled over by police in New Jersey who thought she had weed in her car. Check her out and her reaction to it. There's a lot to unpack there. A lot of white privilege to unpack. Then there's the story, justice delayed, 10 years in jail, but still awaiting trial, where Karan Davis is in prison 10 years and ain't never had a trial yet. What about his constitutional rights? We have a right to a fair and speedy trial, but 10 years is certainly not a fair and speedy trial. That's what Martin Luther King Jr. said, justice delayed is justice denied, and that is justice denied. So check that out. Check out the first database that tracks America's criminal cops and is available to the public. You could literally go look at this cop who just got off with murder out in St. Louis and see what his criminal record looks like, what he's been involved in over the years. You could track them, and it's a hell of a tool for researchers right now, particularly in the abolitionist movement, to start connecting some dots. So check that out for sure. And let me see, there's a couple more that I want to tell you about. New York is showing people how easy it is to divest from private prisons. They're in the process of doing that right now. And I think the other one that I want to point out to you about is a Republican lawmaker who just lost her job for saying that running over protesters is a movement we can get behind. And the meme that was put out by a policeman says, "All lives splatter. Nobody cares about your protest. Keep your ass out the road." It's just empowering people to run us down in the streets. And Heather Hayes, or however her last name may be pronounced, was not the first victim of that. There's at least 7 different cases in 7 different states that have done the same exact thing and run people down in the middle of the street. And now you got lawmakers trying to make that shit legal. Scotty, you want to say something?
North Carolina, Max. North Carolina the state legislature made it legal. If you hit a protester, it's fine. In North Carolina, it is legal.
Exactly. And we have at least 7 different cases of it happening in 7 different states. So now they're trying to make running people over in the streets a sport. And I've seen emergency workers put that on their Facebook about how if you're in my way, I'm going to run you over right here in South Carolina. And we've seen police say it, and now we're seeing lawmakers say it. And if a lawmaker's saying it, you can rest assured it's in the laws that they write, that they didn't just start being racist like this or demonic or murderous like this yesterday. Go check out the laws that they've been supporting. I bet you'll find some that traces right back to those things there. So all of those stories are available in our planning page. Make sure you check them out. That and more. Scotty or George or Otis?
Max, there's another common thread too. We're old enough to understand the last 50 years since 1964, there's been a theme called political correctness. These people have felt that they were suppressed because during the heyday of the civil rights, you had to be careful what you said and how you said it. Once Obama came in office and the lid was off on free speech, the lady you just talked about with losing her job, she actually lost her civilian job with a real estate company. But her position in the GOP there is actually the House GOP whip. Mm-hmm. So she's still an elected official. So we don't even have, and there's all kind of rules for conduct.
Can you say that again so people understand what you just said? She is still an elected official, just like Paula Page.
Morality, none of these clauses work. But these are the same people that have been running for the last 6 decades based on the moral majority, the silent majority. Everything is about Christianity and having some kind of sense of humanity. And the problem that most people don't understand, and I get it all the time with a lot of black people, especially my age, being kind and nice to me with your words is nothing when your actions are enslaving and depriving me of my rights. I don't care how nice you are. I would rather you be a Trump and be overt so I know what I'm dealing with. This lady, how long do you think she's been suppressing those feelings? Until now, they feel free to do it. And most of the people don't want to read it, but I don't want to accept it. But I take people the way they come. I have no illusions. I'm here in Yorktown, Virginia, in what they call the Colonial Triangle. Cornwallis's Cave, Rochambeau Drive, Yorktown battlefields. I'm barely 2 miles away from one of the battlefields where they actually fought this Civil War. And the freedom and revolution and all that stuff. So I'm telling you, I have no illusions about people being honest about where they stand. And Trump didn't come into office by people worrying about their financial situation. Most of them really believe that the blacks that they see successful on TV are all blacks. There's only 2 kinds, the successful rich ones and then the thugs in the inner city. So I have no illusions about what they think of us as people.
And these are the people that are involved in the Convention of States. This is why we say it's so dangerous right now. And I'm going to tell you one thing, and don't doubt this. I've already seen the Trump administration start reviewing the Convention of States. Pence has already gotten behind it. Once the Trump administration gets behind the Convention of States, it's going to freaking push that thing over the edge. Trust me on that. And we need to be a part of that before it occurs.
I dig through some.
Hey, we need to take our last station identification, and just to remind you, we have Mind, Body, and Spirit coming up tonight at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Their special guest will be Kim Malanson, who is the mother of Dewanye Hickerson, who is in Mississippi, the rape by deception case. So that will be Mind, Body, and Spirit. But we do need to take our station identification. Max?
You're listening to New Abolitionist Radio right here on the Black Talk Radio Network. We'll be right back after these messages.
Podcasts and live program scheduling, visit us on the web at blacktalkradionetwork.com.
Welcome back to New Abolitionist Radio. We're going into our final segments of the evening. I know you've been doing a little differently throughout the past few weeks, Scotty, but we're back to normal, I guess, today. So I guess we can start off with our rider of the 21st Century Underground Railroad.
I volunteer to do the profile, the Levi Colvin, so just let me know. I'm ready.
All right. Well, there's a video, Scotty Reed, that I put into the chat room on Uber Conference for our rider. It's a 5-minute video, and it comes from the Real News Network, which are we support wholeheartedly. Real good people trying to do some real things. So, Scotty, if you can pull that up, we'll just play that.
This is Taya Graham reporting for the Real News Network in Baltimore City, Maryland. Finally, justice has been served. A young man named Lamar Johnson has finally been released from jail after 14 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit.
The scene outside the Mitchell Courthouse in Baltimore was emotional, if not tragically familiar.
I'm just so blessed right now, and it's a wonderful feeling.
How'd you do it? You never gave up hope?
It was at times I got frustrated. Sometimes I got frustrated because every appeal I filed, I was getting shot down. And I was like, man, they really trying to kill me in prison for something I ain't do right.
An African-American man was released from jail after spending years in prison for a murder he didn't commit. His name is Lamar Johnson. In 2004, he was charged and later convicted in the shooting death of Carlos Sawyer based on the testimony of 2 teen witnesses. Throughout his ordeal, Johnson said he didn't do it. And 7 years ago, the DC-based Innocence Project took up his case.
It was clear from looking at Lamar's questionnaire that he was not the perpetrator, based on the witness that Ms. Bosme mentioned, who provided a motive for somebody else to have killed him and who provided the information that somebody else had been in an argument right immediately before the shooting.
They found new witnesses who said he wasn't the shooter and convinced the Conviction Integrity Unit for the Office of the State's Attorney to review it.
The shooter's nickname was given to police by members of the community within hours of the murder, and from that information, the investigation centered on determining who that nickname belonged to. Unfortunately, Lamar Johnson was misidentified as a person who went by that nickname and as a result became the suspect and was ultimately indicted. At trial, there was no physical evidence to connect Mr. Johnson to the crime. However, the evidence which suggested that Mr. Johnson was the shooter was the extrajudicial identifications of 2 teenage women. Witness 1 stated that she could not see the shooter's face, did not get a clear view of the shooting, fled the scene immediately after hearing the gunshots, and was not wearing the glasses she needed for seeing distances.
So today, 14 years after he was sent to jail, he emerged a free, if not changed, man.
Prison, I mean, some people belong there, right? But I was treated like an animal in there, right? I was treated like an animal in there, right? It's rough in there. It's rough.
But this is not the first time the Real News has been on hand for the release of someone wrongfully convicted. Earlier this year, 31-year-old Ivan Potts was set free after judges overturned his conviction for possession of a gun. Potts was arrested by the infamous Gun Trace Task Force, 8 officers who have been indicted for robbing civilians and dealing drugs. And like Johnson, Potts says the cruelty of the Maryland prison system is unfathomable and life-altering.
So they put me on administrative segregation, which is segregation. You confined, you only get 1 hour a rec a day, and you locked in the cell for 23 hours out of a day. Same thing Khalif Brado was in, sort of, you know what I mean? But, you know, when I say I almost lost my mind, because I was behind the door, going back and forth to court, my case keep getting postponed because the officer's not showing up.
Which is why the Innocence Project told us they are working on dozens of cases.
And it's not every day that somebody who's convicted of murder is on the same side as the state's attorney's office, and it's a special situation.
Yeah. Any more cases in Baltimore that you're dealing with?
I hope so. Stay tuned.
Okay, we'll stay tuned.
To give people like Johnson and his family a rare commodity in Baltimore, hope.
It was just overwhelming. I couldn't hold back the tears that they both did. That finally, And that long wait has finally paid off.
This is Taya Graham and Stephen Janis reporting for the Real News Network in Baltimore City, Maryland.
Salute to Lamar Johnson. Welcome to freedom, brother. Welcome to freedom. This is why we call it the Riders of the 21st Century Underground Railroad. You destroyed this man's life. You put him through a living hell. You tortured him, and then you let him go. Finally, he's out after 14 years. And we tell these stories every week. And this wasn't from 20 years ago. This was this week.
Well, Max, before you go too far, this is the same city that I just told you about with the community policing, and I'll put it up in New Abolition. This is all tied together. That gang of police officers that were rogue and they finally caught up with them. The community policing this is a city with the Department of Justice consent decree, and they just had a federal judge just dismiss the whole community involvement part of it and bringing in strangers that have nothing to do with that city to run community policing in a city that just is going through this.
All roads point to slavery. That's what we're here for on this program every week. All roads point to slavery. That's what they're practicing. That's what they're doing. They're slave catchers making money on putting your body in these prisons, and just the act of capturing you, at least a dozen different people get paid.
And another thing, St. Louis, I've been tracking that. These young people are getting smarter. They've been trying to use riot police to stir them up, but I don't know if you realize what they've been doing. Since they've been getting in trouble at night, they finally have had a couple of morning sessions that they march peacefully and silently to the police station. So they're not giving police a chance to use the cover of darkness to lock them up. They're now using the strategy of silence. That's another article. So I think we need to really kind of support them in that, and this young people, and they can sustain this thing longer than just a couple of weeks. I don't think they're going to give up, because the police department really mocked them with that whose street, our streets. They're taking that to heart. They actually had a silent march yesterday morning and went straight to the police department and blocked it off with a silent protest.
We all need to take it very seriously. They have literally declared war on us, both publicly and officially, from Sheriff David Clark to the St. Louis, Missouri Police Fraternal Union, who have issued these warnings of death and worse. We need to take this serious.
We need to shut them down. Exactly.
We only got about 10 minutes left in the program and 2 more segments, so let's try to get onto that. Scotty, if you want to take our abolitionist in profile. And I'm picking Ohio for this because, as some of you may know, we are leaving South Carolina after 17 years and starting a new life in Ohio prior to us leaving to Ghana. We'll be staying in a building that was formerly owned by the brother-in-law of John Brown and used as a headquarters for the Underground Railroad in Ohio. So it's a big move for us, and it's a very historical moment. So tonight is Ohio.
Well, I have, before I get started, I have something to say about that, because I'm going to claim this North Carolinian, all right, because
all right.
Yeah, I'm going to claim this North Carolinian for North Carolina, because he was born here, you know. Lots of freedom fighters born in North Carolina. If you study North Carolina history, they are represented throughout the historical documents that exist since the European invasion of this nation. But Levi Colvin is our abolitionist in profile. We do these stories. We take a look back to find at abolitionists, not only to honor them, but to be inspired as well. So our abolitionist in profile tonight is Levi Colvin. Levi Colvin was oh, by the way, this comes to you though by way of ohiohistorycentral.org. All right, so Levi Colvin was an important figure in the Underground Railroad network that helps thousands of victims of slavery escape to freedom in the years before the American Civil War. Colvin was born on October the 28th, 1798 in North Carolina. He was a member of the Society of Friends. Due to his religious beliefs, he became a strong opponent of the enslavement of Africans. By the time he turned 15, Coffin already had begun to assist those. See, the way people write stuff up, they need to rethink that, because sometimes I think calling these people slaves, not sometimes, but it's a dehumanizing. So when we're writing about this history, let's change our language. These people weren't slaves, they were victims of slavery. But at 15 years old, he had started helping victims of slavery escape. In 1826, he moved to Indiana and established a pork processing business. In 1847, Coffin moved to Cincinnati. With the aid of abolitionists in Indiana, he opened a business that sold only goods produced by free laborers. He also became an active participant in the Underground Railroad. He purportedly helped more than 3,000 victims of slavery escape from those who had enslaved them and gained their freedom by way of Canada. Most northern states had either outlawed slavery or implemented laws to gradually end the institution. However, the U.S. Constitution and the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 permitted Southern slavers to go into free states like Ohio and reclaim their victims. So this goes back to what I was talking about earlier about jury nullification. People like Coffin, if they ever got arrested, well, if they was especially in a Quaker area, the jury would just simply vote not guilty, even though this is the law. And so that's why, again, I don't go for that law and order type rhetoric, because the law is often on the immoral side of justice. So however, that's talking about the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850. For this reason, the sponsors of the Underground Railroad maintained safe houses in free states, as well as those states that were practicing slavery, to protect African Americans. Many former victims of slavery went to Canada, where Southern slavers did not have the legal right to retrieve them. Coffin's active participation in the Underground Railroad caused his fellow abolitionists to nickname him the president of the Underground Railroad. Coffin helped African Americans in other ways as well. In 1854, he helped found a African American orphanage in Cincinnati, Ohio. He also pressured the federal government during the Civil War to establish the Freedmen's Bureau. In addition, Coffin helped African Americans establish their own businesses and attain educational opportunities. He died on September the 16th, 1877 in Cincinnati. Several years after his death, African Americans in Cincinnati erected a monument over Coffin's grave to honor his contributions. So he was a Quaker, and he, along with his wife, let's honor her too, because she was right there by his side, Catherine, they both aided over 2,000 victims of slavery at Fountain City, Wayne County, Indiana, from 1826 to 1846. That's just a footnote there I wanted to share. So New Abolitionist Radio definitely salutes North Carolinian and later Ohioan Levi Coffin. Salute to you.
Salute. Indeed, Scotty. There was a point you said in there where they only supported goods made by freed men. And it just, in my head, I remembered you and I in Tribal Rain driving down the road trying to figure out what we could eat that didn't use prison slave labor. Like, we can't eat at McDonald's. Nope. Can't eat at Burger King. Nope. Can't eat at Wendy's. Nope. And we just make a personal choice not to support those businesses.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, our last segment will be for freedom's sake, a history of rebellion, and today I want to remember the Secret Six. The Secret Six, or The Secret Committee of Six was a group of men who secretly funded the 1859 raid on Harper's Ferry by abolitionist John Brown. Sometimes described as wealthy, this was true of only two. The other four were in positions of influence and could therefore encourage others to contribute to the cause. The Secret Six were Thomas Wentworth Higginson, Samuel Gridley Howe, Theodore Parker, Franklin Benjamin Sanborn, Gerrit Smith, and George Luther Stearns. All six had been involved in the abolitionist cause prior to their meeting John Brown and had gradually become convinced that slavery would not die a peaceful death any more than it will today. Of these six men, only Smith and Stearns were truly wealthy. The others consisted of two Unitarian ministers, Parker and Higginson, a doctor, Howe, and at time when men of medicine were middle class, and teacher Sanborn. Gerrit Smith later bailed Jefferson Davis after the Civil War. Brown was planned to capture the weapons from a federal armory at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, now West Virginia, and lead a slave rebellion in the South. While it is unclear whether these men knew of Brown's ultimate plan, it is known that some of them were ambivalent regarding the use of violence as a way to bring about the destruction of slavery. Brown met with the six several times over the course of 1858 and 59 to discuss how he would attack the slave system. In October of 1859, Brown's plan failed. During and after his trial, the New York Times and the New York Herald began to link the names of the six with Brown's. On November 7th, Smith had himself confined to an insane asylum, denying that he had been involved in supporting Brown. Howe, Sanborn, and Stearns fled to Canada temporarily to avoid arrest. Parker was already in Italy, a guest of Robert and Elizabeth Barrett Browning, as it was believed the Italian climate was helpful to those suffering from tuberculosis. We did not know that Brown meant to begin there in Virginia at Harper's Ferry, Sanborn insisted. Like Gerrit Smith, Sanborn felt justified in making public statements which told a part of the truth, but not the whole truth. We expected he would go farther west into a region less accessible, where his movements might escape notice for weeks, except as the alleged acts of some marauding party. And we here today at New Abolitionist Radio salute the Secret Six for their support in the abolitionist movement.
Salute.
Man, they remind me of Peter and them with Jesus. You know what I mean? You're going to deny me three times.
If there's any wealthy people out there who secretly want to be abolitionists because you can't come out, you can secretly fund it. The Black Talk Media Project is a state nonprofit. It is not a 501c3, so I don't have to show my financial records or reveal my donors to anyone. Okay, so we could use some new Secret Six people. We will take more than six, but yeah, all movements take money.
Big shout out to ITB Global, who are making it possible for us to move into this house in Ohio, and also are behind our trip to Ghana. So big shout out to ITB Global. We need more like that out there supporting this movement to make it happen, like Scotty said.
You up in Columbus?
We're going to be about 2 hours outside of Columbus in a little town over there. I don't want to give away the name just yet until we get things there and get settled in.
Okay, because I'll be coming up to Middleton probably by the time you get back from Ghana. I have a good friend that's right outside of Cincinnati. As a matter of fact, we're all Air Force friends, and I just talked to him about the fact that you're moving up that way. So I might get to meet you in person.
That'd be awesome, brother. That'd be awesome. I look forward to it. Well, we're coming to the end of the program. We only got just a couple of minutes left. So let's get our final comments for the evening. And George, if you're still on the line and you'd like to make one, feel free to be the first.
No. Hopefully.
She's not? Okay. There you go. Thank you, George, for participating with us tonight, by the way. Scotty Reed?
Yes, I had a very positive experience in sharing my knowledge and using new media technology through the Black Talk Media Project as a tool for revolution, for liberation, for the end of slavery. And those who attended the class was taking notes and really saw the potential, and also was able to see what we as a small organization with a very small budget have been able to accomplish through our global reach. without the global reach of Black Talk Radio and thereby New Abolitionist Radio, there possibly wouldn't have been that invitation to Ghana to bring abolitionists, new abolitionists from the U.S. to Ghana to help them address it, because slavery is global. It is global. So that was a very positive experience. Thank you to Tribal Rain and your assistance as well, Max and Malefe, for giving me the opportunity. So that's all I have to say. We will end slavery.
Word. Otis, would you like to make a few final comments?
I'd love to see that accomplished in my lifetime, but I'd like to thank you two gentlemen for giving me the opportunity to come on board with you for this short stint. It's really encouraged me, and I do spend a lot of time talking to people about needing to listen in, even if they just give y'all 30 minutes of time. And whatever I can do and keep sending you some research information, I'll do. I appreciate it.
It's our pleasure, Otis, and I appreciate you standing in for me when I needed some time off. For those that have been aware of the trials that our family has been facing these past few years, it has been epic, epic, and now it looks like it's coming to a good conclusion, and the karma is kicking in. I guess my final statements will be this: go all in. Go all in. Stop putting it on the third or fourth, or you'll get to it one day, or you'll consider it later. The time is now. Pick a side. There is no in between. Here's the question: is this legalized slavery as allowed by the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution? Question mark. If the answer is yes, stop playing games with people's life and get your ass on board. And remember this: abolition is a reason for a revolution, so we can finally know peace. Peace.
Rise up, 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 rise up. Showtime. Just lift your eyes up, let your wise rise up. See the signs of the times. If it's time, rise up, rise up. When death and hell dwell among all God's people, when those we chose and trusted have become completely corrupted and inherently evil, when the feast that feeds you starves our father's children, when snuff, porn, and pedo forms begin to get top billing, rise